for coming. This
Is my mic working?
Yeah, are you fine? On behalf of the USC College Republicans and HPP, thanks for coming out to the
I'm so
left.
happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Obviously, you're here to promote your 10th New York Times bestseller,
Yes,
Never
it
Trust a
is.
Liberal Over 3, especially a Republican, which just purely coincidentally is for sale in the lobby.
Yes.
You're aware of that.
We'll be signing it
But,
right here afterwards. Oh, that's a good book.
Now, for those of you who aren't in the know, this is actually a column book. You went back through 10 years of your weekly column.
Yes.
And picked out the greatest hits of Ann Coulter.
That's right.
So what is that process like? How do you choose?
It's a lot more time consuming than you'd think. It's like reading two of War and Pieces, dividing it up, rearranging it, rewriting it, cutting it down to a much shorter book. Jim is one of my circle of advisors, so toward the end, I thought I'd cut and cut and cut and cut and cut, and I sent it into my publisher, and they said, that's great, you have to cut 70% more. I love my columns. So, as I say in the acknowledgments at the end, it became like this right-wing optometrist exam, where I kept sending my poor circle of advisors, this column or this column, this column or this column. And the big one you'll remember was the title for the book, which...
Yes. And you had some alternates.
Yes, I
You want to share those?
Yeah, there were a lot. My favorite runner-up was 4 out of 5 columns aren't worth reading. Presenting the 5th column by But it turns out, I'll tell you one, I think, kind of strange thing. My publisher's objection, another one was just Ann Coulter, solid gold, that sort of thing. Read this while I reload. I thought that was a little too close. That would have been a good one. My publisher, I spent a weekend working on doing nothing but coming up with titles, and I sent them all in, like the top 5, and you may remember this because I was so annoyed with them. They said, no, we don't like those because we don't want it to sound like a column book. And it's 30% of it is new stuff, the beginning chapters, and then the introduction to each new chapter. And then the weird thing is, I guess they think people won't be as interested in a column book, but I really like my columns. I think people will be interested. And I've noticed when I go around, when I was doing Red Eye a couple weeks ago, Greg Gutfeld heard me talking about it, saying it's, greatest hits from the past 10 years. And he got so excited, he said, oh, this is a column book? So I'm thinking maybe we shouldn't have hidden that.
Now, are there any issues or columns you had forgotten about and you found them again? You're like, oh.
So many. As I say in the introduction, I've often said I could keep writing, after a year or two, I could just keep republishing the columns I've already written. Because you finally beat liberals down on a point. You finally get them to admit the truth, and then they shut up about it for a week or two, and then they pretend they missed that column, and they missed that news, and they're right back to their conspiracy theories. And one, I've done this, I think, in a few books. I just mentioned it in the introduction. I don't have a full column on it. But just a classic example of it was the August 6th PDB, Presidential Daily Briefing to George Bush, the title of which was Bin Laden Determined to Attack. Which, as I say, it's like Hollywood, or, waitress determined to succeed in Hollywood. We know he's trying to attack America. Did that just develop in the year 2000? Was Osama bin Laden not on the scene before then? We all knew that. And if you actually read the memo, there was nothing that that had anything to do with the 9/11 attacks. For example, it said bin Laden tends to focus on federal buildings. We think he might be casing federal buildings in New York. Well, that he likes bombs. Based on that, the Bush administration would have had bomb-sniffing dogs around the federal courthouses in New York City as planes fly into the World Trade Center. But they keep, the day that liberals, you'll recall, became hysterical about that, Hillary Clinton showed up on the Senate floor holding up the cover of the New York Post with the headline, "He knew," Bush knew. So first of all, I want to get Hillary on the record for the absolute truth of anything printed in the New York Post, point one. Point two, he didn't know, and point three, who was president before George Bush, who missed 8 opportunities to kill. I summarized the August 6th PDB in one book, I think it was in Gilsey, and I kept hearing them cite the August 6th PDB as if it was just, point by point, and 19 Muslims are going to hijack 4 planes and fly. No, it had nothing to do with what the attack was. And so for the paper book of Guilty, I printed the entire August 6th PDB in the index because it drives me crazy. You can't stop liberals. They're probably still citing.
It's suitable for framing.
Suitable for framing.
Absolutely. Well, we could have found out a little bit more about Clinton's failures if Sandy Berger hadn't gone in and stolen everything.
Yes. Yes.
But you've got a great chapter in the book, one of my favorites, on crime. And we just had Halloween, obviously. And we have our own Jason from Friday the 13th here in California, and his name is Jerry Brown. He just keeps coming back. And, your beloved New York City is about to go through what we're going through with the election of Bill de Blasio. What do you think is going to happen in New York?
Well, I've just started rereading Bonfire of the Vanities again to remember what it's like. I didn't read that much news today, but I did see one story at a beautiful skating rink, Bryant Park. And Bryant Park, before Dinkins, or rather before Giuliani came in, it was one of many public parks in New York that you couldn't enter. It was full of drug dealers, criminals. It was disgusting. You had to cross the street from Bryant Park. It's right behind the New York City Public Library. It's a beautiful park. Giuliani comes in a year later. It's a fabulous public park. They have outdoor concerts and movies, and everybody's eating there at lunch. This is all public spaces in New York were basically uninhabitable for 30 years. Giuliani turned it around like that. And apparently yesterday, they have it's very cold in New York now, they have an ice skating rink in Bryant Park. There was a shooting there yesterday. 16-year-old kid pulls out a gun, shoots at whomever his intended target is, also hits a 13-year-old boy. That is the end of stop and frisk. This crazy idea, and I don't know how much you follow it, since your lives aren't in danger as they are for New Yorkers, but the end of stop and frisk, which was a George Soros campaign, a funded, organized effort to bring this lawsuit to a particular judge who reached out, and actually she was overturned on reaching out and grabbing that decision for herself because she wanted to overturn stop and frisk. One of the arguments that kept being made against stop and frisk was, well, it's not working because only, I don't know what it is, 1%, 2% of the young potential criminals, or the ones stopped anyway, only 1 or 2, 3% actually have guns on them. Yep, that's why they don't have guns. Now there's no stop and frisk, they're carrying their guns again. I mean, the word goes out pretty quickly. If you want to keep your peace, don't carry it.
Is it just amnesia with liberals? Do they just forget how bad things were?
I mean, that's the voters. With liberals, they can't learn. They cannot learn. Amoebas can learn to move away from poison. Fish can learn, don't bite at the hook. Liberals just can't learn, and they have been convinced, and this is a big part of what I write about in Chapter 1, because crime, that is the most important responsibility of government. And liberals will not move away from their belief that if we could just show the criminals, help them develop their self-esteem. They reward us with good behavior. It goes back to Judge Bazelon in the D.C. Circuit, and all their ideas on crime were implemented in the 70s, and we saw massive skyrocketing crime rates.
I thought the signature achievement of the Clinton administration, midnight basketball for the homeless, was going to take care of all this.
That's right. Thousands, tens of thousands of Americans have been murdered, raped, permanently maimed, robbed, burglarized because of idiotic crime policies where if we just show the criminals respect. And then finally, Republican crime policies slowly began to be implemented, first under Reagan, and most effectively and most dramatically under Rudy Giuliani in New York. And even the New York Times was forced to admit. The New York Times, interestingly, endorsed Giuliani when he ran for office the second time. I think he was running against Ruth Messenger, but whomever he was running against, attacked him on crime. And even the New York Times said, "You've got to be kidding. You've got to be kidding. Look around you." And again, the New York Times has pointed out that 35% of the drop in crime in the entire country was because of Giuliani's first 2 years as mayor. And they said, ironically, Bill Clinton may win re-election because of Giuliani's crime policies that Clinton is bragging about.
And you talk about gun control a lot in the book as well, and some of John Lott's research.
Yeah, I don't talk about Lott as much as I have in the past, because I figure, come on, you're all right-wingers. You all read John Lott, haven't you? So I mentioned him briefly, but I talk a lot about various other crazy crime statistics in the chapter on introduction to crime. And the thing I want to alert you all to and do with that chapter are the way liberals twist statistics to create one image in your head, but it's like one of those puzzles in Parade magazine, spot the difference. You have to really know what you're looking for to see what the trick is in what they're saying. So, for example, I'm sure you've all heard the line about, don't buy a gun in the home is 6 times more likely to kill the gun owner than the criminal. Or sometimes it's 3 times more likely, sometimes the fact that the number of times it is more likely is always changing should give you real confidence in that statistic. But I knew that wasn't true, so I looked it up, and it turns out that more than 90% of the times a gun is used to kill the gun owner, it's because it's suicide. But they don't tell you that. You have this image of a homeowner who thinks he's a real hotshot with a gun, and a criminal breaks in and grabs the gun away from him. And then the other thing about that statistic is, notice that they always say is more likely to kill the owner. Oh, and by the way, having a gun in the home does not make suicide any more likely. Japanese have no guns. They have a suicide rate that's like 4 times ours. But the other thing is, why do you have to kill the intruder? Can't you just wing him? Can't you just hold him until the police arrive? He might have a change of ways. He might realize he's been so wrong, and now I'm going to Harvard Law School.
Well, there's another case that you've been, I don't want to say obsessed with, but almost, that's back in the news, the Amanda Knox case, which you read about in the book as well. Yes,
Amanda Knox. This is where I think African Americans really do have a complaint. You'll think the case has nothing to do with African Americans, but I think it does in this sense. You often hear, why is the media obsessed with this or that particular murder? And the answer always is, oh, it's a pretty white girl. Well, with Amanda Knox, she was, luckily, what happened? She's a pretty American girl. She went to study abroad for a year in Italy, and was accused, tried, and convicted of murdering her English roommate who was staying with her in Italy, along with her boyfriend and another guy in town. And by the way, among the reasons we know some of the evidence suggesting that she is guilty is that the first guy she blamed was her black boss. And he sat in prison while they checked his alibi out. And he was in his bar that night. He owned a bar, he was married, he has a child, he had 300 witnesses to where he was the entire night. So they let him go, and that's when the police started thinking, maybe we should be looking at Amanda Knox, because she claimed she was in the house that night, and she saw her boss come in and go into the room with the roommate who got murdered. Eventually, and luckily, I was going to say, in Italy, they print an entire description of what happened at trial, giving both sides of the case. The jury, which are actually judges, they go through it, piece of evidence by piece of evidence, and at the end of each piece of evidence, why they discounted some evidence, why they believed other evidence. So it's as if you were sitting at the trial for the entire 6 weeks it took, or whatever it took. And you can read it. It's translated into English. It's about 300 pages, and Amanda Knox is blindingly guilty. But the American media has just invented facts about the case, as they did with Ken Starr, gone after the prosecutor, and I think the only explanation for it is that Amanda Knox is a pretty white girl. But I give you some of the evidence in that case. One is, I'll just give you one other piece of evidence, and there is legions of evidence. One of the murder weapons, a knife that was used to slit Meredith, the roommate's throat, it had been cleaned and bleached, but they found trace elements of DNA. It had the murdered girl's DNA on the knife blade. It had Amanda's DNA on the handle, and it was found in Amanda's boyfriend's apartment. That's a hard one to argue your way out of. But you wouldn't know it from the way the media has been reporting on it. It's really astonishing.
Well, being the author of 10 New York Times bestsellers puts you in a very select club. I mean, even O'Reilly can't get there. You know, he's gonna have to run out of people to kill. I mean, I don't think anybody's lining up for killing McKinley anytime soon. But what a lot of you don't know about Anne is you're part of an even more select club. You're one of the 6 remaining people in the United States who still watch MSNBC. Anne is obsessed with MSNBC. I've been to her house, and every TV in the place is set to MSNBC, and she hides the remotes, so guests cannot change it. And in the book, the media chapter, which I love, you talk about a lot of your MSNBC faves, but obviously your favorite, your love, is Keith Olbermann, who you spend several columns on. Talk a little bit about your obsession with MSNBC.
All 6 of us who still watch MSNBC have this strange affliction. We enjoy watching things we hate. And for a long time, I resisted writing about Olbermann because, you know, everybody has an idiosyncrasy. You have that guy, Huell Hauser.
Yes,
you actually do like him, though, but you know, if you were a columnist, you wouldn't be writing columns about him. And that's how I felt with Olbermann. Is anyone going to even know who I'm talking about? But he is so absolutely politically ignorant. He knows everything that's on the Daily Cause and nothing else. But he has the rich baritone voice and the guys in doll suits, and so he just repeats whatever he's just read on Daily Cause, which leads to a lot of hilarious errors. The one of the columns I included in the book is the one that causes Keith Olbermann to die a little bit every time anyone points out that he did not go to the Ivy League Cornell. He went to the old McDonald's Cornell. He went to the agriculture school where they teach fertilizer management and milking and that sort of thing, which I normally wouldn't point out. But my idea of the inner circle of hell is going to be condescended to by people who are 6 times stupider than I am. And that's what watching MSNBC is like. And the thing about Olbermann was, he was always attacking other people's educational attainments. There was that woman, Monica Gooding, who was a Christian who worked for the Bush administration. She had gone to, I don't know, Oral Roberts Law School or something. And every night we'd hear Olbermann saying, oh yeah, she sent in 6 buck stops for that law degree. Well, you know, I'm sorry, I wouldn't point it out, but if you're going to go around bragging about your Ivy League education, and that's where he learns to do a radio show and write 3 term papers in an hour. My Ivy League education. If you're going to pass yourself off as Bertrand Russell, no, I am going to point out you went to the old McDonald's Cornell.
We had you on suicide watch for a week when you left television. We didn't know what you were going to do.
Well, there's always Martin Bashir.
I saw him the other day, though. I saw Keith the other day, actually. He changed my oil at the Jiffy Lube over. So he's doing okay. But let's do a lightning round. I want you to rank the following MSNBC hosts on the level of craziness: Martin Bashir, Al Sharpton, Chris Matthews, Ed Schultz, Lawrence O'Donnell, and that Maddow fellow.
Well, the way I think of them, which may be a little macabre, I'm not suggesting anything, it's just I think it says something about your personality, is how each one of them, you know, if it were like Shocker, 3 MSNBC hosts commit suicide. How would they each do it? Keith Olbermann would don his mother's house dress and put his head in an oven. Rachel Maddow, definitely gun to the mouth. Chris Matthews would bungle it. Martin Bashir would do it in such a way to help his employer. This is the main thing I think about Martin Bashir. I mean, he just, almost as much as Chris Matthews, it is all just whatever you want, MSNBC. Am I supposed to be left-wing today? His boss, Martin Bashir's bosses, could come to him and say, hey, we're going to an all-Nazi station. And he would say, fine, I can do it by 5 p.m. And Al Sharpton would commit suicide in such a way to blame some poor white cop.
I just call MSNBC a security camera feed in an insane asylum. That's basically what it's like. But in the media chapter, you talk about the lack of the media doing any postmortems. There's so many issues they come up there wrong on, and that they never come back to. Talk about Jamie Lee Jones in Halliburton.
Oh, that's one of my favorites, and that's in the book. You may not remember the name of Jamie Lee Jones, because weirdly, she's totally dropped out of the media since it turned out she made the whole thing up. But you might remember a big cause celeb about the pro-rape Republicans. You're supposed to call certain Republicans who were pro-rape. And the issue was, it was a little like the gun statistic. I don't know what the truth is, but I know that's not true. And no issue was hit harder, or no one hit this issue harder than Al Franken. It was Jamie Lee Jones, who was working for KBR, I think it is, a subsidiary of Halliburton. And so she claimed that she was gang raped, held in a container by KBR, again, a subsidiary of Halliburton, with machine gun toting man who worked for KBR for 10 days and finally released, where she came back to the United States and did every TV show known to mankind. The whole thing sounded a teensy bit fishy to me, because in my experience with corporate America, they would sell out even an innocent white guy accused of rape. And did they think that Jamie Lee Jones was never going to get back to the stateside? She'd never be able to tell her story? Let's just hold her in a shipping container? In any event, this was the big issue. It was just another boon for trial lawyers. Al Franken's anti-rape bill was to allow people working for contractors in Iraq to sue rather than go to arbitration. All the contractors have to sign mandatory arbitration clauses. If they're allowed to sue, this would give John Edwards a lot more business. So any Republicans who opposed allowing KBR contract employees that opposed allowing them to sue and not being held to the arbitration contract, which they signed, their big John Hancocks, was called an anti-rape Republican. Oh, they talked about it every night on MSNBC, the pro-rape Republicans, and you were supposed to call these senators and accuse them of being pro-rape. So then, lo, a few years later, I see on page 13 of the New York Times a small box about what happened to Jamie Lee Jones. The case was investigated, criminal charges could not be brought. The entire story fell apart, so there are no criminal charges. It gets down to her claim of date rape by one employee of KBR. She saw a doctor the very next day. KBR employees are not allowed to carry machine guns, which kind of, any guns, much less machine guns, kind of shot that theory. She saw a female doctor the next day in Iraq who examined her and did not see, as she claimed, that her breast implants had been burst, that she had, this tearing here and there. No, she was seen by a female doctor the next day. There's a full report. And it wasn't for, I think it was 2 years later that she even claimed that she was held in the shipping container with machine gun toting KBR employees. The case went to trial. She, of course, lost. She's now being, KBR was awarded attorney's fees, and the man she slandered by accusing him of rape, he said, no, we had sex. There was no rape involved. So it comes down to a civil case, date rape case, and she lost that and has been ordered to pay attorney's fees. But that just, the arbitration, being able to get out of arbitration, the trial lawyers bill has gone through. Why can't we go back and revisit that? How about these allegedly pro-rape Republicans introducing a bill that would punish people who make false charges of rape? Because we never really have that. But the story, I mean, this woman was featured on 2020. She was constantly on MSNBC. She was featured on the front page of the New York Times. And when the whole story falls apart, and yet the horrible law has gone through, and Republicans have been taunted as pro-rape all this time, that's a tiny little blurb on page A13 of the New York Times. The New York Times just stares at his shoes.
And it's not just this issue, it's so many other issues. Like the one that really stuck out to me that was false was the Grand down the toilet story, which you talk about in the book as well, which is really not that hard to debunk. Have you ever tried to flush a book down the toilet? It doesn't work so well.
No, and I think what's especially striking about the Koran being flushed down the toilet is that it was the exact same reporter in the exact same magazine where the magazine held the story on the President of the United States molesting a White House intern, suborning perjury, and perjuring himself. It was Michael Isikoff, Newsweek. They won't run the story that's true, because it's embarrassing to a Democrat, but they will run a story that is slanderous to the United States of America and then turn around and say, how dare you say we're not patriotic? Because, see, what I'm thinking is, if you go around constantly telling lies about your country that make your own country look bad, I think that is not the behavior of a patriotic person. If someone went around slandering me, I would not believe them when they say, what do you mean? Yeah, you say I don't love you. Of course I love you. That's why I'm constantly slandering you. And it's not just, I mean, I covered a lot of these and some in this book. In my book, Demonic, about mobs and groupthink. Mobs are very inclined to believe conspiracy theories, which is why they're always on the left. They're always on the left, and sneering, smug Rachel Maddow will talk about, debunction, junction, and a conspiracy theory. Well, no, ours are often theories that then turn out to be true. Rachel Maddow alone has pushed the census worker in Kentucky was killed by a Tea Partier. Do any of you remember that one? Every night. You will see this on no other news program. And as I pointed out, Rachel, there's a reason we're not seeing it on any other news program. It's not true. And there was a census worker, I'll cut to the conclusion, so you're not hanging on the edges of your seats in suspense, but the census worker killed himself, did it to look like it was some sort of terrorist attack for the insurance money for, I guess, for his son, because he was bankrupt. But he was tied up and had a gag in his mouth, and it said, I don't know, there was some like anti-government slogan written on his chest, but it was written in such a way that it looked like he had written it himself. You have to hold a mirror up to see. Oh, that's what it says. And night after night, Rachel Maddow was pushing the theory that that was a right-winger. And, I hate the government. Does anybody really care about a census worker? If anything, we're going after an EPA worker. IRS, a census worker. The whole story was insane, but she reported it with dead earnestness every night. And when it turned out that all of the investigative agencies concluded that it was suicide, it was insurance fraud, Rachel did the brave thing and had her guest house post announce that. She also went on the bridge in Minnesota. Remember over the Mississippi River, there was that horrible crash, a lot of people died. Night after night, not only Maddow, all of MSNBC, that bridge collapsed because the Republicans cut spending. They cut spending night after night, blaming Governor Tim Pawlenty. Hundreds of people died as the bridge collapsed. And then, there's a full investigation, and no, there was a flaw in the original design of the bridge. It had nothing to do with upkeep. Never got an apology for that. The one she's been, well, let's move on. I had
Well, speaking of MSNBC, they're also famous for the close-up of the gun nut at the Tea Party rally,
Right.
which you talk about in the book as well.
Right, well, this audience will very well be familiar with it, but it's an amazing exchange, and I think it can't be, you can't remind people of it often enough. And that is that the Tea Partiers they're racist, so you have this panel on MSNBC, and now they're bringing guns to tea parties, and they're having tea party protests, not, half a mile away from where the president is speaking, our first African-American president. And so there's a panel discussion of this particular shot, and all you can see is the guy's jeans, his derriere, and you see this big, a long gun. And it was weird. What's the close-up on the gun for? Can we see who's carrying the gun? And the entire panel was Dylan Radigan, I forget who else. It's in the book. But they're all going on, and yes, and this is the first African-American president, and they're carrying guns.
And I kept wondering the same thing, too. I mean, I like a good close-up as much as the next guy, but when are they going to pan out?
Right.
When are they going to pan out?
And it got panned out on the internet, and of course, it was an African-American who supports our Second Amendment rights. In
your chapter on Republicans circling the wagons, you talk about friendly fire, and I wanted to read a couple of bits of advice that you have for Republican candidates, and I'm quoting from the book here. Number one, do not get elected by patriotic middle-class Americans, then get to Washington and start doing the bidding of the media and your rich friends from Wall Street and Silicon Valley by pushing amnesty. And number two, remember that the non-Fox media is your sworn enemy. If they start lavishing you with praise, you have become the enemy of mankind, or worse, John McCain. There's been a lot of talk in the last few months about the internal war, as they say, in the Republican Party, the Tea Party versus the establishment. What do you think is going on in the party vis-a-vis the Virginia governor's race, the New Jersey governor's race?
Well, first of all, I hope Chris Christie reads that chapter, because he seems to be falling into both of those traps. Well, I've been trying to get Republicans out of the paradigm of establishment versus Tea Party. I think we're kind of fighting the last war in some ways. I see the establishment, and sometimes it's not quite the Tea Party. I now am convinced it's people masquerading as Tea Partiers who are hurting the Republican Party. There are also consultants. There's also ego. There's greed. Liz Cheney running against one of the most conservative United States senators, an incumbent, Mike Enzi in Wyoming. How's that going to help our party? How's that going to help us get a nice veto-proof majority in the Senate? No, it's just, it's almost like a Kennedy family move. No, she's getting to that age. She wants to run. So you got to step aside. Thanks for keeping the seat warm, Mike. And, I love Liz Cheney. If only she had moved to South Carolina to run against Lindsey Graham, we could all be separate from the Senate elections, but on the presidential elections, because we just finished this, half of our primary candidates for the past two election cycles should not have been running at all. As I said in the book, before he got a TV show, Newt Gingrich running to get a TV show. Congratulations, you got a TV show, and 6 Republican congressmen lost their seats because of you. You have consultants who are looking for the deep-pocketed candidate rather than the Republican who can win. But the reason I'm suspecting that a lot of the Tea Partiers and libertarians now are George Soros plants is that we kind of know that the Tea Partier in Virginia, it came out that one of his big sources of funds was a Democratic Obama bundler from Texas. This guy, Matt Bevin, running against Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. He's taken huge amounts of money from the government for his sad little bankrupt business, and what has Mitch McConnell done to offend anyone? I get John McCain, I get Lindsey Graham. Mitch McConnell presided over a Senate in which not one single Republican voted for Obamacare. What do you want? And Kentucky is a seat we could lose. Liberals are salivating over this alleged Tea Party candidate in Kentucky. If you look at the list of governors of Kentucky over the last 50 years, they've all been Democrats. There have been 2 Republicans, literally in more than half a century, of Kentucky, only 2 Republican one-term governors. Do not think we can't lose that seat. The reason people even think of Kentucky as a red state is because Mitch McConnell has been able to keep getting elected. And I just read today, I think it was in the New York Times, one of the Democrat seats we have to pick up is Mary Landrieu's seat in Louisiana, very red state. There's a fantastic congressman running against her. He's a doctor, his wife is a doctor. He wins all of his elections by like 70 points. He was at the forefront of opposing Obamacare. He was all over TV. I can't even remember his name right now. And now I think this is a fake group, this Senate Conservative Fund or something. I'm reading the New York Times, Senate Conservative Fund has endorsed somebody who's never run for any office. Fantastic, good idea, because those people often win Senate elections. And I looked up this Senate Conservative Fund or Conservative Senate Fund or whatever it is, and first of all I'm suspicious because on their About page they won't tell me who runs it. George Soros. And then I just searched generally for news items about it, and there's a woman, Lisa Lesker or something, who was speaking for it. Well, her last gig was running Newt Gingrich for president. This seems to me like a woman who just wants Republicans to lose.
Is there going to be a kumbaya moment? Is there going to be a way for the quote-unquote establishment wing to get together with the Tea Party wing and kind of work things out? Do you see that happening, or? Because the Tea Party is out there doing the grassroots work.
The real Tea Party is, but there are fraudulent Tea Partiers. I mean, are you including Christine O'Donnell? And is she one of the heroes of the Tea Party?
Well, that's part of what I think.
Because if Republicans are going to sit home pouting because Christine O'Donnell isn't on the ballot, then we're going to have 10 senators.
It's about getting the right Tea Party candidates. A few more Ted Cruz's and a few less Christine O'Donnells.
I say burn them both.
Okay, you are part of the problem. No, burn them both. 3.5 years after every single Democrat voted for Obamacare and not one Republican voted for Obamacare. Do not tell me there is not a difference between the parties. No, we have got to take a nice veto-proof majority in the Senate, and then frankly, it doesn't. I used to love Chris Christie. I don't like him now because he's come out for amnesty. And a few other things. He was a terrible speaker at the Republican National Convention. But in general, he's charismatic.
He would add a lot of weight to the presidential ticket.
He's a big presence. But it wouldn't matter what his position is on amnesty if Republicans could win a nice veto-proof majority. You get a little less nervous. It's not so important who our presidential candidate is. Just get a majority, a huge majority in the Senate. And we're not going to do that by primarying our own guys. Let's take Kentucky and Wyoming, where Mike Enzi is, and look, unless they get a good candidate to run against Lindsey Graham, I don't think they should primary him either, and he's my favorite candidate to primary. But right now, it's ridiculous to run someone who isn't at least a United States congressman for the U.S. Senate. This is a 6-year term. It's a term for life. We've lost that Delaware Senate seat forever now. For life. And why? Because Tea Partiers or whomever was going to rock the world by nominating Christine O'Donnell. Good work.
It shouldn't be that hard to find a candidate who's not a witch. It's not that big of a relationship.
It shouldn't be that hard to find a candidate who doesn't have a tendency to mull about abortion in the case of rape, but apparently it is. 3 of them actually, Sharon Angle, Richard Murdoch, and Todd Aiken. This is the fantasy fiction book I'm going to write, because I keep recommending Republicans that we get a Luca Brasi. We need a hunting accident. Certainly. I want to be that Luca Brasi. I'm angry enough and I think I could do it.
Well, should we take some Q&A? Should we
Sure.
talk to the audience? Do we have the mics? We have some attendees are going to be mini Phil Donahues and run around with some mics.
And they will keep hold of the mics.
Yes, and feel free to ask away. Let's see. Guys, I'm going to start with you. Tell us your name too, please.
Hi, I love you. I'm a huge fan. I I think you make so much sense, but I'm just curious if, because the title of so many of your books is about talking to liberals, if you've ever actually converted a liberal.
Yes. Thank you for asking. I planted her. Look, I'll give you two striking examples because I think they're kind of funny. One was I was at Syracuse a few years ago, Syracuse University, and I go out to dinner with the college Republicans afterwards, usually, and in the event set up by Young Americans Foundation, one kid kept telling me what was happening at the Green Party meetings on campus. And he knew it in such intimate detail, and then somebody else said, and then somebody said. And I finally said, what, are you a mole in the Green Party? How do you know everything that goes on in the meetings? He said, oh no, I was a Green Party member, but I saw you give a speech here 2 years ago, and you were the only person I heard who made sense, and now he's a member of the college Republicans. And my favorite one was at KABC, one of my favorite stations, and I think it was a John Phillips show one night. He had a friend who was coming in who had a stack of all of my books, and I was signing all of them, and he was a cute young kid who had just graduated. He may have graduated from USC, I forget where it was, but it was someplace around here. And I'm signing the books and just making casual chit-chat with him, and ask him, you know, why I ended up with so many books. Because he's a young pup, and he said, well, I didn't know who you were, but I heard your name when I was standing outside one of your speeches at my college with a bullhorn denouncing you. And then I was in a bookstore a few months later, and I saw one of your books, and I picked it up, and I said, well, I'm going to see what this evil woman has to say. And he said, I started flipping through it and thought, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. This isn't convincing anyone, but it's a college speech story, so I'm throwing it in. At Tulane, the college Republicans walked through the room where they were making the anti-Ann Coulter posters one night, and he heard one liberal yelling out, how do you spell Coulter?
It's what Dennis Miller calls animus in abstention. Most of these people have never read a column, never read a book. Most of the people who interview you have never read a column or have never read a book. Do we have another question?
I'm Brian Foran from Altadena, and I'm a Trojan grad student here right now. You were talking about how we have Tea Party versus establishment. I don't really care for that, that division and whatnot. I think the concern that I experienced witnesses is that we did have Republican White House and Republican House and Republican Senate, and they had some issues with spending and whatnot. And I think we're having a bit of a trust issue, and we want to make sure our Republicans, when we elect them, they actually stay to it. So could you elaborate about how we can make sure that when we do elect the Republicans, they will not go off the reservation and find ourselves dealing with that very unfortunate species known as a rhino?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's the heart of the problem. As I describe in the book, first we get George Bush reelected, incumbents do usually win, in 2004, and the first thing he does is start pushing amnesty. Or as we call it, the suppress the base move. And who else was supporting it? Our next presidential candidate, John McCain, and of course every single Democrat. So, you know, Bush was probably going to lose seats, or Republicans, in 2006 in the midterm election. It was due. But it didn't have to be a wipeout. It was a wipeout in 2006 because Bush did exactly what I advise Republicans not to do. Get elected by nice, patriotic, middle-class Americans, go in and start doing the bidding of Mark Zuckerberg. Then we run the old Crypt Keeper in 2008. And look, we were probably going to lose that election. 8 years of one party, the other party usually wins the White House. But it might not have been a blowout in the House and the Senate if we hadn't run such a ridiculous candidate as John McCain. I don't know who is voting in these Republican primaries.
I'm not even sure John McCain didn't vote for Barack Obama.
No, he definitely voted for Obama. But in the primaries, how did we get him as our candidate? 2010, that's a happy memory. Except for a few seats.
And we could be due for a repeat.
And not only that, you're totally right about the committees. Yes, it's the establishment and it's the Republican Party that has caused this problem to begin with, because the Tea Partiers or the conservatives, people like me who write books and talk on TV, we are not supposed to be realists. We're supposed to be ginning up the troops and being provocateurs. and changing public debate. We're not supposed to be the realists saying, let's not run this black Christian minister as lieutenant governor in Virginia because he's going to pull down the top Ken Cuccinelli because of all the things he said as a Christian minister, these spicy things he said about homosexuality. No, let's run more of that. They're supposed to be the ones being the hard-headed realists, but instead they're busy making money, trying to sell us out on amnesty. And so when people like me come in, somebody just asked me back at the VIP reception, why didn't you run for office? You are all missing the point if you don't understand I am exactly who you do not want to run for office. I'm supposed to be making, and everyone on talk radio and on TV, I at least see that I shouldn't be picking the one that, oh, I'm passionate about this fellow, and look at the things he said about the meeting. No, that's Newt Gingrich, that's Christine O'Donnell. So yeah, I mean, you're right, the establishment, the committees, the party committees, they're supposed to be the hard-headed realists. They've completely let us down. It has to be us, so we have to do a better job picking the candidates.
Plus, with you, there's the whole getting up before noon thing.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. We have a question in the back.
Yes, hi, Ann. Quick question as far as the lack of mea culpas from the left. And to his credit, Larry Elder has not let go of this. But in the run-up to the Iraq War, I think it was General Sada who was a defector from Iraq. And a lot of intelligence sites said that Hussein, who was no dummy, just simply put all the WMDs on trucks and sent it to his sister Ba'ath Party in Syria.
Syria.
Now
Yeah.
the ugly warfare rears its head, and people are going, gee, I wonder where those chemical weapons could have come from. And I don't know why George W. or his administration never made a strong defense for their reasons.
Yeah, they were not very good talkers. I agree with that. The one that I'm the most annoyed with is, I mean, I'm the strongest supporter of the Iraq War. I think George Bush has given up on it. I will never say that that was not a magnificent war, an important war, a war we had won and accomplished so much in. And by the way, it looks like Obama has pissed a lot of it away. Hopefully not all of it, but I mean, we took out a dangerous dictator who had not only had weapons of mass destruction, but had used them so much more than Assad in Syria has. I mean, he killed, Saddam Hussein killed 5,000 Kurds in a single day. Women, children with chemical weapons. He funded the families of suicide bombers. He had attempted to assassinate the former president of the United States, former George Bush. And also, it has a very educated populace, young, Western. It's perfect for regime change. And as I've long maintained, we need an Arab Israel. That was Iraq when there were the riots over the Danish cartoons, for example, or the Quran flushing incident. There was one majority Muslim country that was absolutely pacific, and that was Iraq. Well, I think, unfortunately, our current, as you Democrats always do, president, may be pissing that away. But another reason, I think that's enough of a reason to take out Saddam Hussein, stay there, build a democracy that was so magnificently successful. But the thing that we have dropped, just one additional point is check intelligence, and I should say quickly, we have the worst intelligence gathering services in the entire world. Burkina Faso has a better intelligence agency, and their intelligence agency is a witch doctor. Because when the Democrats got control of Congress right after Watergate, they said that they vowed to dismantle our intelligence agencies piece by piece, brick by brick. That was your guy, Ron Dellums. He was head of the House Armed Services Committee, and they did it. And now our entire CIA is basically a secret society of newspaper readers. If it's not in the Tehran Tatler, they don't know.
Well, they're too busy spying on us to spy on our enemies. That's the issue.
So they have discounted this crucial piece of intelligence I'm about to tell you about, and that is, and maybe you're familiar with it, check intelligence, which is 1,000,000 times better than our intelligence. Walmart intelligence is better than our intelligence. They say that Mohammed Atta was meeting with Saddam's intelligence agents in the Prague airport 2 weeks before the 9/11 attack. There is some evidence supporting that, including cell phone evidence. Andrew McCarthy has written a lot about this. I've written about this. But our CIA discounts that. And so nobody on our side mentions it again. Meanwhile, it's been proved 1,000,000 times, even to the satisfaction of the New York Times, that Valerie Plame was not an undercover agent. It was not against the law to reveal her name, and it wasn't released by anyone in Bush's White House. It was released by anti-Iraq War Richard Armitage, and yet right there in the New York Times we have Maureen Dowd citing a Hollywood movie for the proposition that Valerie Plame was a very important undercover agent. They don't give up on things even after they've been proved wrong in their own newspapers. And we're not allowed to cite that anymore, that Mohammed Atta, the mastermind of the 9/11 attack, was meeting with Saddam's agents in Prague 2 weeks before the 9/11 attack. We just abandoned it wholesale, and I think that's a mistake, bigger than the George's Sada thing.
Hi, Ann. My name is Hancock Rojas.
Hi, Jimmy.
How are you?
His parents called him that.
Exactly. Thank you, man. It's great to hear on a national level yourself speaking about that GOP strategy. In all honesty, sucks. Unfocused, no direction, and basically lack of leadership. I have a twofold question. The first one, why do we keep repeating using the same strategists on the national, state, and local level? And the second part is, in your book, you provide a blueprint on what the GOP should do for the coming 2014 and upcoming presidential elections.
Why we keep using the same strategists, I mean, everything I do is, I think we can win if enough people notice the things I'm noticing. So part of it is just to alert people to this. Don't fall for the inspirational candidate running for president. And I know I'm going to have to say this over and over again. I know you all love Ben Carson, but no. Do not chase the mechanical rabbit. And I too, I love Terman Kane, I love 999. So it's not like I didn't do the same thing, but it's going to be a governor or a senator. So when you're picking a presidential candidate, I don't care who it is, it's just got to be a governor or a senator. I mean, I'll care when it gets closer. For the 2014 elections, why do we keep using the same ones? Because I don't think we know their names. And I've raised it in this book, and I promise you, I'm getting their names. The ones who ran Linda McMahon twice in Connecticut, ran John Racy like 6 times in West Virginia. You can't figure it out the first 2 times, twice for the United States Senate. And, you know, I sort of hate bringing this up because the candidates themselves, I mean, God bless them, they spent a lot of their own money and they're good Republicans, but they were lied to by their campaign consultants who told them they had a shot. They did not. They did not. And that Bevin in Kentucky doesn't have a shot. And the Manus guy running in Louisiana doesn't have a shot. So all I can do is alert true patriotic Americans who care about their country, don't fall for this. I think a lot of these Tea Party groups are George Soros fronts.
Well, the whole consultant class is a problem, and it's a little inside baseball. But Pat Goodell's been on a tear about this as well. Is these guys, they have no concept of the Japanese sepulcher. They never fall on their sword. The guys that lose campaigns, like Mike Murphy, for example, keeps going on, and he gets hired for the next campaign.
Right.
The next campaign, because they make money whether the candidate wins or loses.
Yes.
But how are we going to get those people out and bring some new blood?
We have to know their names, we have to know to look for it, and that's the reason I talk about Linda McMahon and John Racy in Connecticut and West Virginia so much is that you're right, it's inside baseball, it sounds really boring, people's eyes glaze over, but the reason I focus on those 2 Senate races is we definitely could have won 2 of those Senate seats in West Virginia. We definitely would have won at least 1 of them in Connecticut. That means there's no Obamacare. It makes a difference.
That?
Hi, my name is Chris Jonigan, and I'm a grad student up at Pepperdine University. And I just wanted to say, regarding the 2016 election, that whereas the Republicans seems to have a very much deeper bench than they did in 2012, you hear about Marco Rubio, Chris Christie, Ted Cruz, so on and so forth. Whereas the Democratic side, it seems to be based around just one person: is that Hillary, will she or won't she run? And I just wanted to ask you that if Hillary does you think that Hillary will run or won't she run? And if she does run, then who do you think the Republican is that stands the best chance of beating her?
That's a great question because it's something that should perk a lot of you up. I know there's a lot of despair and depression after the 2012 election, but take out Obama and look at their team. You think we have slim pickings? Hillary Clinton, I mean, I just think she gets talked about as the inevitable nominee. She was talked about as the inevitable nominee in 2008. I'm from New York, where for the past 2 years I've heard the next mayor is going to be Christine Quinn. Election day, oops, it's Bill de Blasio. Okay, and you don't have the Obama magic with Hillary, even if it is Hillary, which I'm dubious about. Who else do you have? Joe Biden?
Nobody's fainting at that rally.
No, some chubby girls from now. Andrew Cuomo, who is one of the top 5 people responsible for the financial demise when he was head of HUD, he was the one pushing these suicidal mortgages on the banks, and was, proudly bragging about it at the time. It'll be fun having Biden and Hillary and all the Democrats go after Hillary on Benghazi. You have that Malley or McMalley from Maryland, governor of Maryland. He's retarded. And hopefully, I'm spreading the wealth here. I do have advice for Democrats in this book, and that is hold 312 primaries before choosing your president. We find it really helps distract voters from concentrating on the purpose of the exercise. Run lots of people who are not governors or senators, so hopefully we'll get some more Kuciniches in their primaries. But we don't want Kuciniches or, but Duncan Hunters, Newt Gingrich's, Michelle Bachmann's in our primaries. All I care about is only consider former governors, former senators. But who knows with the Democrats? I'm just saying the good news is once the Obama magic is gone, they really have a suck-ass B team.
Yeah. Does anybody really like Hillary Clinton? I mean, this room, we got it. But in the overall scheme of things, I mean, she was the anointed one in 2008. She couldn't even win her own party's primary. I think it's a lot of hype, but when you get down to it, a lot of people she just rubs people the wrong way.
Well, the weird thing about it is, well, for one thing, does anybody like Hillary? I supported her in 2008 because it was McCain, Obama, or Hillary. And by the way, I was right. Of those 3, Hillary would have been the best. The weird thing about the way the media talks about Hillary now is it's like the whole country owes her. Oh, we ran off with our trophy wife Obama. I don't know what came over us, but we owe Hillary. She is owed it. Screw you, we don't owe her anything. You dumped her for Obama, not the country. And even in 2008, it was as if the country owed her because she married Bill Clinton. Well, no, we didn't marry him, you did. We all suffered.
My name is Marvin Nolan, and I was rather disappointed when Cuccinelli lost in Virginia. And then I find out that our Republican brainstorms didn't back him with any money or anything else. How do we get these deadheads to back candidates that can win?
No, the Virginia race is really depressing. The only good part of it illustrates every group I attack in chapter 1 of this book, Killing Republican Candidates. Ken Cuccinelli is articulate, he's bright, he's good looking, he could have been the future of the Republican Party if he'd won. Maybe we could have run him in 2 years. And every single group I talk about in chapter 1, I don't think they were working with one another, but they all worked separately to undermine Ken Cuccinelli. First, the one you mentioned, the Republican National Committee barely gives him any money. Number 2, and I remember the night this happened, I do think we should get rid of the caucus system. I'm totally against caucuses. I was amazed that Romney won the Iowa caucus. I thought it was going to be Ron Paul. These caucuses remind me of New York City, co-op apartment meetings. Victory goes to the pushy. No, we're Republicans. We just go and quietly vote and go home. Don't make us spend 18 hours in some convention hall arguing and trading. But Republicans had a convention in Virginia to pick their lieutenant governor, maybe their governor too. And they picked this guy, and he's a wonderful man, I'm sure, but he's a black Christian minister. The things he has said about abortion and Planned Parenthood and homosexuality as a Christian minister, it killed Cuccinelli. It killed it. The guy ended up, and by the way, he's smart, the black Christian minister. He went to Harvard Law School, he finished college in like 3 years. I'm sure he's a wonderful man. Maybe I'd go to his church. Do not run someone like that in a statewide election. You have to get votes other than my vote Republicans. So we have, I don't know what to call that, the Tea Party extremists. I remember the night that happened thinking, congratulations, Virginia Republicans, you've rocked the world, and now you just lost the governorship. So we got him, I think his name was E.J. Wilson. Disastrous for Cuccinelli. We have the sitting governor of Virginia, a Republican who's utterly corrupt and using power to get mink coats for his wife, and the Rolex watches. This is like a Republican Bob Torricelli. Oh, it's so tacky. Who else? I think we could, Christie could have spread the wealth around and showed up for one day in Virginia. One day. And the fake libertarian candidate running. The purest libertarian. Oh, give me a break. Anybody who runs a third-party candidate, whether it's libertarian or some, fake conservative Tea Party thing, you're helping the Democrat win the election.
After this, we have time for one more question, and then we have to wrap it up.
Hi, my name's Ethan. I'm one of those crazy liberals.
I hope you've learned a lot today.
Okay, so basically we obviously differ on certain lines, but I wanted to wonder, like, what is exactly kind of the world that you're looking for exactly? So I've read, like, obviously it's skewed for me, like when I go to Google search, like everything's kind of skewed to liberal type stuff, but like I've seen that, for instance, you don't think women's suffrage should be allowed, and things like you want to, like, kind of like rape the environment and things like that. I was just wondering, like, what's your ideal environment?
No, that's a good summary. My ideal world is I'm sorry, Ethan, a world without liberals, a utopia. No, look, the point on women's suffrages, for one thing, it's always the first question I get on a college campus. It's simply to make the point, which is true. Well, it's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen. Don't worry, ladies. Since women have gotten the vote, it's an interesting fact, and they got the vote in different states at different times. It didn't all happen with the 19th Amendment. In fact, Western states tended to give women the vote first. As soon as women get the vote, this has been tracked by economist John Lott. You see, government spending, state to state or in the federal government, flat, 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 flat. As soon as women get the vote, government spending goes through the roof. Except for Obama in 2008, it's simply a fact that if women did not have the vote, other than in 1964, Republicans would have won every presidential election since the early 50s. So it's really strategic. Right now, my big thing is, what is it? I think it's the 26th Amendment. I want to raise the voting age, which I think is also going to be a big hit on college campuses. But when the voting age was lowered from 21 to 18, just by the way, the argument was you can drink at 18, you can be sent to war at 18, you should be able to vote at 18. Well, okay, you can't drink at 18 now. As for going to war, I would have an exception for any member of our military. Around the horizon, you people aren't even taking off your parents' health care until age 24. 26? That's what I want the voting age raised to. Ooh, pressure.
it's history now, but I can't sleep thinking about it, and you're the perfect person to answer it. I know you like Romney a lot. I was crazy about Romney, and I thought he would have been a fabulous president. Why do you think those idiot 3 million Republicans didn't vote, and who do you think they were? I need to put that to rest.
Oh, well, I have good news. That turned out not to be true. This was the, sorry, let me move this. This was the, what came out the day after the election was, I think this is what you're referring to, was that McCain allegedly got 3 million more votes than Romney. That turned out not to be true. But I will tell you what happened in the 2012 election. And by the way, you and I weren't the only people who were totally convinced Romney was going to win. Gallup had him up 5 points before Hurricane Sandy. Even after Hurricane Sandy, Gallup had him up by 1 point. The surprise turnout of the 2012 election was elderly black women, presumably because the media, the non-Fox media as I call it, had just, lied and propagandized and said Republicans are trying to block the black vote. They're trying to block the black vote. Huge surge. Blacks over the age of, I think it's 45, voted at a higher rate than all white voters. Wow. And white voters have been the turnout champions. We go out in the rain, we go out in the snow, we're like the postman. So that was one surprise, and by the way, back to the earlier question, I don't think we're going to see that with Hillary or Cuomo. And the one place where the blue-collar vote was depressed was in the upper Midwest, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan. That's an area of the country Obama had been working since before he became president, when he was pushing for the auto bailout. So people who are demographically identical, blue-collar workers in western Pennsylvania, voted overwhelmingly for Romney, but they didn't, white blue-collar workers in the upper Midwest, because Obama had been working it. Remember, Romney killed that steel worker's wife? And, it didn't help that we have Santorum and Gingrich trying to portray Romney as Thurston Howell and a vulture capitalist up until, when did Romney finally wrap up the primaries? June? We had to put up with those idiots? And I wrote this in a column, I'm not sure if this is in the book. Romney increased the vote from McCain in every single demographic, except 2. Young people, old people, evangelicals. That turned out to be a lie. Oh, evangelicals won't vote for a Mormon. They voted more for Romney than they did for McCain. Jewish voters, Christian voters, Protestants, Catholics, women. Every single way you can chop up the electorate voted more for Romney than they had for McCain, except 2 groups, Asians and Hispanics. Who are the 2 largest groups of immigrants since Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Immigration Act? Oh yes, Hispanics and Asians. Democrats figured out they could not change Americans' minds, so they decided to bring in different Americans. And that's what they've been doing since Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Immigration Act passed. We've been taking in an average of about 1 million immigrants a year, 9% from the third world. The majority of them go on government assistance, far higher than at the native rate. It drives me crazy when people say, oh, it's only 15% above the native rate. We're talking about legal immigration here. Oh, they only go on government assistance at 15% above the native rate. It's like saying there's only 30% rat feces in the food. I'm thinking no one who is not a citizen who comes here, no one should be on government assistance. Isn't that if there's nothing else we can agree on, surely it is someone who comes from another country to this country who needs help from the taxpayer is not the kind of taxpayer or immigrant we're looking for. Teddy Kennedy had and the Democrats, they had a design. We're going to change the demographics of this country so that we can start winning elections again. And they did it, and part of that played out in the 2012 election. If the demographics of this country had been the same as in 1980, Romney would have won a larger landslide than Ronald Reagan did against Carter in 1980. But back in 1980, the country was almost 90% white. Romney won more of the white vote than Ronald Reagan did. Today, the country is 63% white. Thus, my opposition to my former love, Chris Christie. There is no more important issue than immigration, both legal and illegal, and I don't care where you're from, but I want to be upping the average. I want people who are better than us, not people worse than us.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up. If you like stats like that, you can get more in the new book. We're going to take about a 5-minute break. The folks here at USC will tell you where to line up to get your book signed. This was so much fun. Thanks so much for coming out.